working. The Houthis are scattered, and now they have an even bigger problem. Iran has just abandoned the Houthis as the US rains bombs down on Yemen. The move has massive implications, not only for the situation in the Red Sea, but what may be a weakening Iran as it pulls support for one of its most crucial proxy groups. On April 3rd, the Telegraph, a UK-based media outlet, reported that Iran had ordered all of its military personnel to leave Yemen. It's unknown precisely how many of its troops Iran had stationed in the country, which has been embroiled in a bitter civil war for over a decade. However, we do know that Iran had at least deployed a unit of its Revolutionary Guard to Yemen back in January 2024. That presence was overseen by General Abdul Reza Sharlai, a man the Washington Institute says that the first Trump administration attempted to assassinate in 2020. Was Sharlai still in Yemen? We don't know for sure, but if he was, the recent Iranian withdrawal means that he's on his way home along with any troops he oversaw in Yemen. The Telegraph quoted an unnamed Iranian official as claiming that the move comes amidst Trump's intense bombing campaign in Yemen, along with his efforts to force Iran to the table for negotiations over Iran's nuclear program. According to the official, conversations in Iran currently focus on Trump and how to deal with him. Every meeting is dominated by discussions about him, and none of the regional groups we previously supported are being discussed, the official claims. So why exactly is Iran withdrawing from Yemen? It appears one reason is the bombing campaign the US launched against Yemen, which Trump has already described as unbelievably successful. The US has been bombing Houthi targets in Yemen since March 15, killing dozens of people in the process. The Houthis have been attempting to frame the airstrikes as being focused on Yemeni population centers, claiming on March 15 that the US bombs had already killed 31 people while injuring 101 others. The US, on the other hand, claims its bombing campaign has been successful in decimating the Houthi leadership and some of its key military sites, making the group less capable of carrying out assaults on commercial shipping vessels in the Red Sea. The truth is likely somewhere in the middle. What we do know is that the US bombing is relentless. In his effort to ramp up the pressure on the Houthis, and Iran by extension, Trump has ordered daily bombing raids. On the second week anniversary of the bombing started, PBS reported another strike that killed at least one person as the US took out a major Houthi military site in the Yemeni capital of Sana'a. The most recent strike, which took place on April 3rd, killed at least 6 people as the US battered several rebel-controlled areas of Yemen. All told, Trump's campaign has killed at least 67 people in Yemen. Those strikes come as the US engages in a military build-up in the Middle East. The US has sent at least 6 of its B-2 Spirit bombers to a remote military base named Diego Garcia. Stationed in the Indian Ocean, the base is on a small island controlled by the UK. It's within range of Iran, at least when the US is deploying its bombers and the aerial tankers that allow those bombers to refuel in mid-flight, and it's out of range of Iran's missiles. That B-2 deployment is a warning to Iran. The US is starting with the Houthis. It'll turn its attention to Iran if Trump doesn't get what he wants. Other US moves include the deployment of the USS Carl Vinson to the Red Sea. That massive aircraft carrier is currently en route to the Middle East, where it will join the USS Harry S. Truman, which is already serving in the Red Sea as the launching point for the current US airstrikes. When the USS Carl Vinson arrives, it'll essentially double US air power in the region, meaning the Houthi leadership will face even more danger. Add to all of this the US's late March announcement that it was sending the 124th Fighter Wing to the Middle East, which counts several A-10 Thunderbolt II ground attack aircraft in its arsenal.
Introducing
alongside 300 personnel, and you get even more pressure. The Houthis have attempted to respond. The Telegraph says that there is currently a Russian military expert stationed in Sana'a who's advising the Houthis on how to carry out counterattacks against the US aircraft carriers. However, even that expert has an ulterior motive. As Russia tries to focus the Houthis on the US, it's also dissuading them from attacking Saudi Arabia, which is the venue Trump and Putin have used to hold ceasefire talks relating to the Ukraine war. Houthi attacks on the US Navy in the Red Sea are believed to have become so frequent that they're now the heaviest US sailors have faced since World War II. But the Houthis haven't scored any direct hits with their missiles and drones yet. The US is hitting its targets every day in Yemen. The success of the US bombing campaign also brings us to another reason why Iran is withdrawing. It doesn't want to get into a direct fight with the US. The official who spoke to the Telegraph makes a brief mention of this, stating that Iran doesn't want to have any of its personnel in Yemen in case they get caught up in the US airstrikes. It makes sense. If an Iranian military official gets bombed in Yemen, Iran will have no choice but to respond in some way. It would have to. The country has positioned itself as a key power player in the Middle East and constantly engages in anti-US rhetoric. Allowing the US to kill one of its own, even if the death happens in a different country, would both confirm once and for all that Iran is helping the Houthis and force Iran into sparking a direct fight. And it's a fight that Iran couldn't win. According to Global Firepower, or GFP, which ranks 145 military nations each year using over 60 factors, the US should wipe the floor with Iran in a direct fight. GFP ranks the US as the world's strongest military power, with Iran coming in 16th. The US has 718,000 more soldiers in its active military, for a total of 1.328 million, as well as having 799,500 reserves compared to Iran's 350,000. No matter where you look, the US comes out on top. It spends $895 billion per year on its military, compared to Iran's $15 billion. The US has over 13,000 aircraft, compared to Iran's 551, around 6 times the number of armoured vehicles, almost 3,000 more tanks, and a navy that is around 3 times the size of Iran's when it comes to asset numbers. No wonder Iran doesn't want to get into a direct conflict. It appears that the country has decided that discretion is the better part of valor in the Houthi situation. With no Iranian military personnel in Yemen, there's also no chance of an accidental conflict sparking between the US and Iran. Furthermore, Iran is also facing up to the reality that Trump's Yemen airstrikes have been as successful as the US president claims them to be. For instance, March 25 brought with it the news that one of those airstrikes had likely killed Hezam al-Asad, a senior member of the Houthi Supreme Political Council. Al-Asad seemed to disappear off the face of the earth toward the end of March. That's important. The Houthi official has been one of the Houthis' top propagandists, as he used X to repeatedly post videos in support of Gaza as he rails against Israel. His last X post came on March 20, when he simply wrote, "Death to Israel." Since then, nothing. It seems likely that al-Asad, along with many other members of the Houthis' leadership, have either gone into hiding underground or have become the victims of the US airstrikes. Iran is watching all of this happen, and it seems to have come to a decision. It simply isn't worth supporting the Houthis anymore. The official who spoke to the Telegraph appears to confirm this concept. The view here is that the Houthis will not be able to survive and are living their final months or even days, so there's no point in keeping them on our list, the official claimed coldly. They were part of a chain that relied on Nasrallah, the former Secretary General of Hezbollah, and Assad, the former Syrian president, and keeping only one part of that chain for the future makes no sense. That's a revealing comment by the Iranian official. It tells us that Iran was actively using the Houthis and Hezbollah, along with Syria, to maintain its power base in the Middle East. With the Assad regime in Syria lying in tatters, a vital part of that chain of influence was broken. Hezbollah has been weakened by its fight against Israel. Now the Houthis are under attack, and Iran believes that it's better to cut and run than to support a group that will inevitably lose in the face of overwhelming US pressure. So, what does Iran abandoning the Houthis really mean for the situation in the Middle East? For one thing, it appears that US pressure being placed on Iran is working. That's according to Shanam Wakil of the Chatham House International Affairs think tank. He tells the Telegraph that Trump's approach to the Houthis in Yemen is much different from the approach former President Joe Biden took during his 2024 campaign against the same group. Biden took a defensive posture against the Houthis. He removed the group's designation as a terrorist organization in 2021, a move that Trump has since reversed, and his 2024 strikes were generally deemed as responsive rather than proactive. Trump has taken a different approach, says Wakil. Trump is trying to prove that he's more effective at ending and solving conflicts than the Biden administration was, Wakil tells the Telegraph.
Newsflash, your lip fillers aren't fooling anyone. They look painful, cost a fortune, and let's be
The strikes are connected to the maximum pressure campaign that he's endorsed, and he wants to simultaneously send a message to Iran and to the axis of resistance that his administration is going to take a bolder approach to destabilizing regional activities. That pressure is focused both on Iran and the Houthis. We'll come back to what this means for the Houthis in a moment. On the Iran front, Trump is applying all of this pressure because of something we mentioned earlier. The US wants to bring Iran to the table for negotiations on Iran's nuclear program. In March, Trump sent a letter to Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian telling him that the US wanted to open talks. Iran rejected that proposal. Pezeshkian said, "We responded to the US President's letter via Oman and rejected the option of direct talks, but we're open to indirect negotiations." That response prompted Trump to step up the US bombing of the Houthis, along with encouraging the US military build-up in the Middle East that we mentioned earlier. Trump sent a clear message to Iran. You can't have nukes, and it's a timely message given that Iran seems to be edging closer to developing its own nuclear warheads. According to Iran Watch, Iran is already at the point where it's capable of enriching uranium up to 60% uranium-235 or U-235. This is a naturally occurring isotope in uranium that undergoes fission when it's bombarded with neutrons. That fission leads to a massive energy release, which sparks the chain reaction needed for a nuclear warhead to detonate. Most modern nukes use uranium enriched to 90% U-235. However, it's possible to build a nuke that uses just 25% U-235, meaning Iran is already well on its way to having enough enriched uranium to build a warhead. Iran is also installing more centrifuges to enrich its uranium. For instance, November 2020 saw it install a cascade of 174 IR2 centrifuges, with a similar cascade of IR6 centrifuges being installed in February 2021. Iran Watch says Iran could build a nuclear weapon within 4 months if it manages to fit 3,000 IR2s, with the time needed falling to 2.5 months if it has the same number of IR6 centrifuges. In other words, Iran is inching closer to having a nuclear weapon. When Iran first refused Trump's request for talks, Trump responded by saying that the US might be forced to bomb Iran into oblivion. Iran responded to that claim by saying it may have no choice but to accelerate its nuclear ambitions due to Trump's pressure. An advisor to the country's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, outlined Iran's position. "We're not moving towards nuclear weapons, but if you do something wrong in the Iranian nuclear issue, you will force Iran to move towards that because it has to defend itself. Iran does not want this, but it will have no choice." Axios reported on April 2nd that Trump is now seriously considering holding indirect talks with Iran over its nuclear program. But while he makes up his mind, he'll keep putting pressure on Iran via the Houthi airstrikes. And Iran's abandonment of the Houthis suggests that the US pressure being placed upon it is working. Trump's strategy is simple. He's taking out one of the key groups Iran relies upon to project power in the Middle East. With that group gone, the US can then turn all of its attention to Iran at a time when Iran would really prefer for the US to not be watching what it's doing. Iran is being forced to focus inward, with Trump likely hoping that this latest move will bring Iran to the table, directly or indirectly, sooner rather than later. But beyond what the Houthi abandonment means for Iran's nuclear ambitions, it also signals something else that Iran doesn't want to admit. The country is getting weaker. The Telegraph notes this in its report on the Houthi abandonment. It points out that Israel's massive success against Hamas and Hezbollah, which the outlet calls key nodes in Iran's network of proxies that includes the Houthis, has created an opportunity for the US to weaken Iran's influence in the Middle East. The outlet also says that Iran's failed missile strikes on Israel in 2024 have enhanced this weakness. Back in April 2024, Iran fired around 300 missiles and drones at Israel in a move designed to support Hamas in Gaza. Bloomberg reports practically all of those weapons were either shot down or failed to reach their targets. A second missile strike, this one in October, using 200 missiles, featured more potent missiles but was similarly unsuccessful. These failures were damaging to Iran. Combined, those strikes amounted to 2 of the largest launches in the world's history, and they did practically no damage. They certainly weren't enough to stop Israel from attacking Hamas. They also failed as a display of power. Iran inadvertently proved that its missiles weren't strong enough to hurt Israel, which means that the US will be confident that Iran can't do anything to seriously damage it. Iran still has hundreds of missiles. As Bar-Ilan University senior researcher Dr. Ayel Pinko says, the Iranians produce hundreds, many hundreds of missiles of different types and ranges. In the Iranian ballistic missile industry, more than 10,000 engineers work in its various factories.
This mouse backpack is the best I've ever used.
Introducing the Mouse X.
The problem for Iran is that its missiles have already proven to be duds, for the most part. Combine that with the falls of Hamas, Hezbollah, Assad, and now the Houthis, and you get a nation that's more susceptible to US pressure because it's revealed itself to be a paper tiger. Iran's entire Middle East network is falling apart, and it appears there's little the country can do about it, other than to come to the table just as Trump wants. Israel's military has destroyed much of Hamas's infrastructure in Gaza and inflicted heavy losses on Hezbollah in Lebanon, says the Telegraph. Iran also failed to protect Bashar al-Assad, the former Syrian president and a key ally, against a rapid rebel offensive that overthrew the dictator in December. The Houthis were all Iran had left in its proxy network. Now, it's abandoned that group in a final display of the country's true weakness. It all amounts to Iran falling from its position as one of the Middle East's major power players. And that fall also has an obvious impact on the Houthis. Why? With Iran withdrawing from Yemen, it's possible the country will soon stop its shipments of weapons to the Houthis. Previously, Iran shipped everything from its Shabab 3 ballistic missiles, which have a range of up to 1,242 miles, to its Birkin 3 missiles, which can travel up to 745 miles. It's missiles like this, in addition to a small army of drones, that the Houthis used to carry out its attacks in the Red Sea that it claimed were in support of Hamas in Gaza. The Houthis have used these weapons, alongside its small navy, to conduct 500 attacks on Red Sea shipping and Israel since October 2023, according to Crisis Group. Those attacks have impacted a waterway through which about 12% of the world's maritime traffic and 40% of its container shipping flow. Iran's support gave the Houthis power, which the group attempted to leverage. Former Yemeni diplomat and current Chatham House Associate Fellow Mahmoud Shayra tells the Telegraph, after the collapse of Hezbollah and Assad's regime, the Houthis are now on the front line and have been conducting very intensive attacks. They are escalating and taking adventure because it makes their political life longer in Yemen, according to their own calculation. According to Shayra, the Houthis were even rebranding the missiles and drones they received from Iran to hide their links to the country. The power the Houthis gained from their Iranian link allowed them to control Sana'a, where they printed money and collected taxes without any form of representation. But now Iran is gone, and its abandonment of the Houthis could be seen as a withdrawal from the front lines of a proxy war Iran helped to spark. For the Houthis, this means no more support, no more training, and potentially no more Iranian weapons. With Iran gone, the Houthis will only be able to maintain their Red Sea attacks and their current faltering defense against the US airstrikes for so long before they crumble. Perhaps that will lead to the most important outcome of Iran's abandonment of the group. Weaker Houthis may mean that Yemen's former government can return to power. We may be witnessing the collapse of two regimes in real time. The Houthis can sustain themselves for so long now that Iran has abandoned them. That very abandonment may also signal the end of Iran's use of proxies to wreak havoc in the Middle East. And it all stems from Trump's decision to turn up the pressure on the Houthis with an airstrike campaign unlike anything the militant group faced under Biden. But what do you think about Iran abandoning the Houthis? What does this tell us about the future of the Middle East and how the relationship between the US and Iran will evolve? Has Iran just lost its position as a key Middle Eastern power player? Let us know your thoughts in the comments, and